Well, good morning and welcome to a brand new series for the month of July. And I want to welcome everybody at all of our worship communities over at the Fire Hall, the Warehouse, our friends up in Churchill, those of you watching online live or during the week, and of course everybody here at the factory. So we are on to day 158 of our 1,000-day journey through the Bible. We have just said, you know what we're going to do? I'm going to continue to challenge you every single week to be in the Word of God, to read one chapter a day, and to ask God, what are you saying to me through this chapter? So we're moving into our 14th book since February 1st, day 158, and we're going to journey all the way through. It's going to take us 3 years to get through the entire Bible. I'm blogging every single day, and if that helps you in your devotions, you can track with us on that as well. So we're into the book of 1 Samuel. And actually, we started at the beginning of the week. We're on chapter 7 today. Tomorrow, moving into chapter 8. And the first 7 chapters introduce us to this book. It's an action-packed sort of book, and it's a book that really is a turning point in the history of Israel. So up until now, Israel, the people of Israel, have been operating under a theocracy. A theocracy is where God is the king or the ruler, and they're obeying God. However, it's about to change. In fact, tomorrow, in our 8th chapter, we're going to begin to experience the shift or the change from a theocracy to a monarchy, where they are asking for a human king. And God says, you don't want to do that. It's going to be a mess. And you're going to read about that tomorrow, but they say, no, that's what we want. So this last week, we were in chapters 1 to 7. If I was to summarize chapters 1 to 7, it would be an incredible exercise in missing the point. That's how I would summarize those first 7 chapters. There is so much missing the point, and we're going to be chasing these people as they chase flawed pursuits. And the first 7 chapters really set the pace for this. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, oh, you know what? This stuff is 3,000 years old. I mean, this book happened 1,000 years before Jesus was even born. How in the world is any of this relevant to my life today? Now, if you're thinking that, this is probably going to blow your mind, but what we read about 3,000 years ago, this last week, is all over the news. It's breaking headlines all over the place. In fact, in the last couple of months, Live Science has been asking this question: what is the Ark of the Covenant? If you did your homework, if you did your reading, you know that the Ark of the Covenant features as sort of the star of these first 8 chapters. And Live Science is saying, what is it? They want to know today, what is the Ark of the Covenant? National Geographic, just last month, the Smithsonian a couple of years ago was exploring what is the Ark of the Covenant and will it ever be found? People today are in search for the Ark of the Covenant. They're looking for it. They're wondering what it is, why it's so powerful, and where it is today. Just on Friday, Haaretz, which is the Israel news service, they broke a story featuring, again, the Ark of the Covenant, wondering where it is, if anybody's going to find it. Could it actually be in Israel, along with Fox News and the Daily Beast? All these people, it seems like everybody is talking about the Ark of the Covenant except us. Us Christians, we don't seem to be talking about the Ark of the Covenant. In fact, if I was to poll you, my guess is that a pile of us in this room don't even know what the Ark of the Covenant is or what its significance is. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to give you a crash course. Since we just read about it in chapters 1 to 7, I'm going to give you a crash course in the Ark of the Covenant. We're going to answer the question, what was the Ark of the Covenant? Where did it come from, and when did it actually come into being? What was its purpose? Whatever happened to the Ark of the Covenant, and where is it today? And why is it that so many people are talking about and looking for the Ark of the Covenant today? So let's begin. What was the Ark of the Covenant? Well, the Ark of the Covenant was essentially a storage box. That's all it was. It was a storage box that God said, I want you to create this box to store something special in. Now, the Ark of the Covenant was 47 inches long. It was about 27 inches deep, and it was 27 inches high. So it wasn't a great big box. It was made of acacia wood. It was covered in gold. The whole thing was covered in gold. It had 4 rings on it for the poles, for the priest to carry it. It was never seen by the people. It was covered with badger skin and then a blue cloth so that the people, even when it was being moved, could not see it. It had sort of a crown-like edge around the top of the lid. It had a couple of cherubim or angels on the top, and it had a very significant place in the life of Israel, and it had three objects inside of it. It had a jar of manna, which was the food from heaven, the bread from heaven that God gave them to sustain them out in the wilderness. It had Aaron's rod, or his staff, which was actually budded to life with leaves and buds and fresh almonds on it. And this was a sign that God used at one time in the Old Testament to show that Aaron and Moses had God's authority. And it especially had the Ten Commandment tablets. Now, that's what the Ark of the Covenant was all about. That's what it was supposed to carry. So where did it come from and when? Well, we first read about the Ark of the Covenant in Exodus chapter 25. God gives instructions on how to build it and what it's supposed to look like and what it's for. Now, let me give you just a quick overview of what happened in Exodus. So Exodus chapters 1 to 18 is all about Moses trying to get the people out of Egypt because Pharaoh has them as slaves. You know the story. You've seen the movie, all right? So you know what's going on there. And there's all these plagues that come. And then, of course, the last one is where the eldest son in the home is killed. And if they don't have the blood of the lamb on the post, which is the Passover lamb, that all happens in chapters 1 to 18. In chapter 20, God gives Moses the Ten Commandments. This is my covenant. This is the Ten Commandments I want you to live by. And then just over a little bit more in chapter 25, God says, I want you to put those Ten Commandments in a special storage box, the Ark of the Covenant, and I want you to put that in a special tent called the tabernacle. So what was the purpose of the Ark of the Covenant? Well, the practical purpose was that it was a storage box used for transporting the Ten Commandments around as the people were going through the wilderness. However, it began to carry much more significance than just simply being a storage box. In fact, let's slow things down just a little bit and begin to get a sense of the power that came with the Ark of the Covenant. So in Exodus chapter 25, right after Moses is told how to build this thing, this is what we read. Place inside the ark the stone tablets inscribed with the terms of the covenant, which I will give to you. Then put the atonement cover on top of the ark. I will meet with you there and talk to you from above the atonement cover between the gold cherubim that hover over the ark of the covenant. From there, I will give you my commands for the people of Israel. So this becomes a representation of God's presence on earth. Out of all the places in the universe that God could be and that God wanted to show up, he wanted to show up. So he teleports in to the Ark of the Covenant, above the Ark of the Covenant. This is sort of like a rendezvous point. It's sort of like the first ever FaceTime, where Moses gets to actually communicate with God, and God is going to give Moses the instructions for the people Israel. So what happened to the Ark of the Covenant, and where is it today? Well, the Ark of the Covenant actually has an amazing history. It's mentioned more than 200 times in the Bible. Most of us, we just sort of skip right over it, but it's got some great significance. It started out as a storage box for the sacred Ten Commandments, but then it began to be known as the very presence of God, and with that came all sorts of miraculous events. In fact, let's read just a little bit of these. In Leviticus, here's what we read, a warning that God gives to Aaron. Warn your brother Aaron not to enter the most holy place behind the inner curtain whenever he chooses. If he does, he will die. For the ark's cover, the place of atonement, is there, and I myself am present in the cloud above the atonement cover. So God's presence was very much associated with the Ark of the Covenant. It began to be seen as something that had a lot of power. In fact, we read a little bit later on in Joshua, in Numbers, we find out that it actually was used for leading the nation of Israel. So in Numbers chapter 10, it says this, they marched for 3 days after leaving the mountain of the Lord with the ark of the Lord's covenant moving ahead of them to show them where to stop and to rest. So it was the Ark of the Covenant, God's presence, that actually was leading the people on their journey. And then a little bit further on in Joshua, we read that the Ark of the Covenant was there. In fact, it was the first item, and this is why the power is associated with it, to split the Jordan River. In fact, we read this in Joshua chapter 3. Look, the Ark of the Covenant, which belongs to the Lord of the whole earth, will lead you across the Jordan River. As soon as the priests who are carrying the ark, their feet touch the water, the flow of the water will be cut off upstream, and the river will stand up like a wall so that the people can pass through. A few chapters later, in chapter 6, you know the story of the nation, the army, and all the people marching around Jericho 7 times. Well, it was the Ark of the Covenant that led the way. It was the Ark of the Covenant that was there when the walls of Jericho fell. Then we move into 1 Samuel, which you read this last week, and this is when the real craziness begins to happen. So the nation of Israel is at war with the Philistines. And they go out to battle the Philistines, and they end up losing, and 4,000 men are killed. And they sit there and go, what went wrong? Something happened. And so we read this, and we read this last week in 1 Samuel chapter 4. After the battle was over, the troops retreated from their camp, and the elders of Israel asked, why did the Lord allow us to be defeated by the Philistines? And then they said, oh yeah, duh, we forgot the Ark of the Covenant. We forgot our secret weapon. Our secret weapon, that super good luck charm, we left that Ark of the Covenant in Shiloh. Let's go and get it. If we carry it into battle with us, it will save us from our enemies. So they bring the Ark of the Covenant, their secret weapon, into the Israeli army camp, and the men go crazy. I mean, they are yelling, they are screaming, they are dancing, they're jumping up and down, and the Philistines can hear, the Philistine army can hear what's going on in the camp of Israel. And they begin to become terrified, the Philistines. And they say, oh my goodness, we're dead meat. They got their secret weapon. We're going to have to fight as if our lives depend on it. So sure enough, the Israelites, they go out into battle. They're feeling kind of cocky. They now have their secret weapon out in front of them. The Ark of the Covenant is going out in front of them. And what happens? You read it this last week. 30,000 Israeli soldiers are killed. And they go back and they're scratching their heads and they're going, what happened? We had our secret weapon, we had the magic box out in front of us, and we still lost. How does this make any sense? And so they go back and they tell the high priest Eli, who's 98 years old, he's sitting outside the gates. They tell him, look, we lost the battle, but not only did we lose the battle, our whole plan backfired, and the Philistines kidnapped and stole our secret weapon. They now have the Ark of the Covenant. Eli falls over backwards, breaks his neck, and dies. And this is where it gets even crazier. So the Philistines take the Ark of the Covenant, and they say, this is a pretty powerful, pretty sacred box. We better put it in a sacred place. So they put it in their temple. Their temple was dedicated to their idol god, Dagon. The next morning, the priests come in, and Dagon, that was a statue standing there, was now laying down as if he was worshiping at the Ark of the Covenant. And they go, this is weird. So they pick Dagon back up, and they put him back up there. The next morning they walk in, and Dagon is laying down in front of the Ark of the Covenant, but this time his head is broken off and his hands are broken off. And they say, this thing is freaky. We do not want anything to do with this. So they ship it off to another town, another Philistine town. However, that town begins to experience tumors in unsightly places. And it begins to kill them. And rats are infesting their town. They have had enough of this thing, so they ship it off to their friends at another town, and they begin dying of tumors and rats, and this happens for 7 months, town after town after town. Finally, somebody says, listen, this isn't worth it. Let's get rid of this crazy box. And so they send it back to Israel. It goes back to Israel. The Israelites are so excited that the ark comes back. It comes back on this ox cart with some cows and with a wagon. They kill the cows. They burn up the wagon. They sacrifice the cows to God. They say, thank you so much for bringing our magic secret weapon back. Some of the men in the town kind of forget how powerful this thing is, and they go to look inside of it, and 70 of them are killed. And now the Israelites are saying, we don't want this thing either. So they put the Ark of the Covenant in cold storage for the next 20 years until David restores it to its rightful place in the tabernacle in the Holy of Holies. And then David's son Solomon, when he builds the first temple, he puts it in the Holy of Holies, and it sits there until the Babylonians destroy the temple and Jerusalem in 586 BC. And after that, it vanishes from biblical history only to show up again in the 1981 Steven Spielberg movie. Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And this is where everybody begins to go, oh yeah, I forgot all about the Ark of the Covenant. Look at that. Now, this is a fascinating movie. If this was before your time, if you have not seen this, this is real movie making. I mean, this is fantastic, such a great movie, but it also basically tells the biblical story, except it changes the characters. Now it's not the Philistines, now it's the Nazis who in 1936 are looking for the Ark of the Covenant. The Americans hire Indiana Jones to try and find it before the Nazis do, because the Nazis know if they can get their hands on this secret magic box with its secret weapon powers, they are going to be invincible. And in fact, one of the villains kind of understands how this whole thing works. He says this, quote, "The Ark of the Covenant is a transmitter, a radio speaking for God." They kind of got this idea out of Exodus that God's presence actually showed up and spoke to the people. So what really happened to the Ark of the Covenant, and why are people still talking about it today? Well, nobody knows. There's speculation, and this is why it's breaking all over the internet these days and all over different news sources, because there are claims that the Ark of the Covenant has actually been located in Ethiopia, that it was smuggled out of Israel into Ethiopia, and that it's in a cathedral there, that only one man, the Ark Keeper, has ever seen it. They do not allow it to be verified or tested in any way, so nobody's really sure. Others say no, the Ark of the Covenant, there's an archaeologist that says he found it underneath Golgotha where Jesus was crucified, and that the blood of Jesus actually dripped through a crack onto the Ark of the Covenant. Somebody else says no, the Ark of the Covenant was buried underneath the temple, which of course the temple was destroyed, and the Muslim Dome of the Rock now is over that spot, and nobody's allowed to go underneath and to search for it. Others say there's a reference in Revelation that talks about the Ark of the Covenant showing up in heaven, so God probably beamed it up to heaven because he liked it so much. And most scholars believe that simply the Babylonians, when they destroyed the temple, they took the Ark of the Covenant, they smashed it up, they melted the gold, and they destroyed it. So why are people still talking about it today, and why is it making headlines 3,000 years after the Philistines stole it in 1 Samuel? Well, first of all, it's a very interesting and intriguing religious artifact. But beyond that, people today still believe that whoever has the Ark of the Covenant is going to have a secret weapon, and this will make their nation or their army invincible. That it's got magical powers, that it's got some sort of power. It's like the super good luck charm. It's this talisman. And like the people of 1 Samuel chapter 7, everybody is missing the point. Everybody that's looking for this thing is absolutely missing the point of what the Ark of the Covenant even was all about. And so we want to begin to learn today what the Ark of the Covenant was and what it wasn't. The Ark of the Covenant wasn't about magical power or some secret weapon. The Ark of the Covenant was simply this. It was about God's presence with his people. It was a visible place where the people were assured that God's presence was there. The Ark of the Covenant was a visible reminder of the deal, the covenant, the arrangement, the pact between a perfect, amazing, omniscient, omnipotent, powerful creator God and his creation. It was about a covenant. It was about a relationship. It was about a relationship arrangement or pact. And what it was basically was that God was saying, look, if you want to connect with me, I'll tell you the terms on which you can connect with me. You can connect with me, number one, by obeying my commands, by adhering to my laws. Number two, by accepting my authority in your life. And number three, by acknowledging my provision. You see, that's why we had these three objects in the box. They were there to remind us of how we have a relationship with God. The tablets with the 10 Commandments represent God's laws. In the universe, there are physical laws that everybody knows that there are physical laws that govern our universe. But what everybody seems to forget is that there are also spiritual laws that govern our universe. And God was saying, these are the spiritual laws by which you need to abide. Aaron's rod was there to represent God's authority and his rulership as creator, as the one who put it all together, the one who created it all. He has the authority to say how it's going to go and how it's going to work. And so he was saying, listen, this is a representation of my authority. And the jar of manna was God's provision. God's chief creation was humanity. He just longed so much to create you and to create me. He wanted a relationship with us, but he knew that we didn't have what it took to even live our life. We needed the air in our lungs. We needed water and food and all the provisions that we have. And so he said, I will be your provider. I will sustain your life. And you need to remember that, and you need to worship me as that provider. So we have these ways that we relate to God by obeying his commands, by coming under his authority and acknowledging his authority, and by receiving his provisions, and yet sin has cut us off. So now we have a problem. In fact, the three objects that are in the ark actually are reminders of our failure to abide by our part of the covenant. The 10 Commandments. We've broken those 10 Commandments. Those 10 Commandments are a reminder of our failure, of our failure to live up to the terms of the deal that God made with us. So humanity has broken the deal by disobeying God's laws. Humanity has broken the deal by rejecting God's authority, and we find that all the way back in Genesis where humanity says, no, I'll be my own God. I'll determine my own truth. I'll make my own truth. I want to be the God of my own life. So we reject God's authority, and humanity has broken the deal of the covenant by snubbing God's provision and chalking it up to accident or chance or their own hard work or fate or whatever, instead of saying, God, this comes from you. We're so grateful. We've broken the command. So the items in the ark actually are a reminder of our failure on our part of the deal. Now, that's kind of a sad story, right? That doesn't leave you in a very happy place. However, that's only half of the ark and only half of the story, because you see, that's only the bottom half. Now, God instructed that there be a lid put on top of the ark, a lid to seal those items in, a lid to seal all that was broken inside, a lid that was bordered by a crown-like edging and had a couple of cherubim on top, and this lid had a name. Now, what would you call a lid that is on top of a representation of human failure? Broken laws, broken authority, broken provision. What would you call the lid over top of that? You might call that the lid of judgment, or the lid of failure, or the lid of the seat of judgment. But instead, God says, no, I want you to call it the kepheret. I want you to call it the kepheret. Now, what is a kepheret? A kepheret is a covering, but it gets a little bigger than that. It's an atonement. Actually, it means the mercy seat. This is not a judgment seat. This is not a reminder of all our failure. God is basically saying, look, I know you blew it. I know you reneged on your part of the deal. I know you broke your part of the deal in not obeying my commands and not giving into my authority and not acknowledging my provision. However, I will cover over this, and I will show you mercy, because I long to have a relationship with you if you will do one thing. If you will return to me in humility and in truth, and you will desire a relationship with me. With that, so what ended up happening, the way this worked in ancient times, is that the Ark of the Covenant was in the Holy of Holies, and the priest once a year would bring the blood of an animal that was killed, that life was sacrificed, and he put the blood on top of the mercy seat, and God would see that as a sign that another life was given for this, and would say, I would have mercy. The price has been paid. I will have mercy, and I will forgive the broken laws. I will forgive the broken authority and the broken provisions. God said, I want to do this. I want to make up for what you don't have the ability to do. In the Ark of the Covenant is a profound message. And the message is this. God is saying, people, I want to be with you. I want to do everything possible to mend our relationship and to walk with you. I have requirements because I'm holy. You need to obey my laws. You need to come under my authority. You need to acknowledge my provision. However, I know you don't even have what it takes to fulfill your part of the deal. So here's what I'll do. I will cover you with mercy if you will just come back to me with a whole heart. I need you and want you to come back to me with a whole heart. And so this really is God's message to us. But the Israelites and the Philistines in 1 Samuel chapters 1-7, they completely miss the point. They think the Ark of the Covenant has got magical powers. They think the Ark of the Covenant is a secret weapon with all these divine, magical, good luck kind of powers to it. And what they fail to realize is that the power is made real in relationship with God. That's where the power comes from. And that's why they went out and they had their secret weapon out in front of them, and 30,000 men died, and they lost the battle. even with their secret weapon out there, because it wasn't about the magic in the box. It was about a broken relationship, and they had broken their relationship with God. Church, God's heart, this is God's heart for us. He wants to be close to us. He wants to do relationship with us. He wants to do life with us, and He even wants to make up for where we lack. You know, the opening chapters of 1 Samuel, there's a lot of battling going on, and there's a lot of enemies, and Israel keeps losing the battle. I wonder how many of us can relate to that. I wonder how many of us would say, you know what, that kind of sounds like my life these days. It just feels like I keep losing the battle. You know, as a pastor, I get a lot of people that come and share their life with me, and I've lost count over even the last couple of months of how many people have come to me, and maybe up front after the service, and we pray together, or maybe in my office, or maybe just bumping into them. And they just seem compelled to want to tell me their story. And it'll inevitably go something like this. Can I tell you about the enemy in my life? Can I tell you about the enemy in my life? Because it seems like everybody's got an enemy. And for some people, the enemy is depression. There are so many people in our church that are just brought down so low, and they've got this crazy dark cloud of depression over them. And so they'll tell me about this enemy of depression or some mental illness struggle stuff. And we pray together, and we ask God to help them. I get people coming to me all the time, and they describe the enemy that they're up against as having chained them up. And sometimes they'll even kind of show me the engraving on each of the links of the chain with the name of what's binding them. I mean, this might sound cliche, but I mean, I can't tell you how many guys come to me and say, I'm bound up with pornography. I just can't seem to break it. It's got a hold on my life, and as much as I desire, you know, I might be good for a week or so, and then I just kind of slip back into this in a moment when I'm all by myself, and I'm bound up with this stuff. Or people that are bound up with alcohol addiction. I mean, there's people at Riverwood that are stuck on drugs or gambling. I mean, it's just, yeah, it sounds like a cliche, but it's real life. It's real people that are bound up by this stuff. But then there's other people that come and say, you know what my enemy is? My enemy is grief. I mean, I suffered a loss a year or 2, 3 years ago, and it's so debilitating. It's such a heavy sense of loss in my life. I'm just bound up by this grief, and that's my enemy. And then the number of people that are coming just saying, you know, it's brokenness. I mean, I have so much dysfunction in my life. And my marriage is broken. My relationship with my kids is broken. My thoughts, they're broken. I mean, I just struggle with brokenness all over the place. And every time somebody comes and shows me their enemy and talks to me about their enemy, you always get the sense that they would love to find a shortcut. They'd love to find a secret weapon. They'd love to find some magical way of kind of getting through this without having to do the hard work. But here's the deal. That's the problem of what the Israelites fell into. They thought there was a shortcut. They thought there was a secret weapon. They thought there was a book, a seminar, a something out there that was going to fix their problem, and they failed to realize that the true power comes in a relationship, a genuine, authentic, humble relationship with God. And that's why they lost the battle. Because they had not come back to God, they had gotten distracted, and they had absolutely missed the point. You know, people continually these days are missing the point. Maybe we're not going after these, you know, religious relics like the Ark of the Covenant, but we're looking for that magic thing that is going to fix our problems. You know, it's amazing to me in the world of relics, what people will go after. There are people today, millions of people, who are seeking to touch, to find, to be in the presence of, they've got all these crazy relics that they are just so believing are going to change their life. And take the cross, for instance. There are people who claim to have slivers and fragments of the actual cross that Jesus died on. And they believe if they can touch it, if they can see it, if they can pray in front of it, it's going to have some sort of power on their life. There are these fragments of the cross in cathedrals and churches in Brussels, Venice, Paris, Spain, Serbia, Pennsylvania, and on eBay. You can buy your own, okay? So if you want to go out and buy your own piece of the authentic cross to change your life forever, you could do that. But that's just the beginning of the frenzied desire for artifacts. The bones of the 3 wise men are apparently in a cathedral in Cologne, Germany. The holy tunic, the robe that Jesus apparently wore, is on display in another cathedral in Trier, Germany. The spear of destiny, the spear that apparently is the authentic spear that pierced Christ, is believed to be in a museum in Vienna, Austria. The Shroud of Turin is in the Chapel of the Holy Shroud in northern Italy. The pillars that Peter and Paul were strapped to and whipped against are apparently in Vatican City, Rome. The head of John the Baptist is actually in two places, which is pretty miraculous in itself. It's in an altar built by Michelangelo in Rome, but it's also in a cathedral in France. The chains that held Paul during his martyrdom are in Rome. The finger from doubting Thomas that went into the side, into the hole, is in another cathedral enshrined in Rome. The fire in Notre Dame Cathedral that took place, the firefighters rushed in and broke into a safe to get the authentic nail that pinned Jesus to the cross, apparently, and the authentic crown of thorns, which they believe is there. And then, I don't mean to gross you out, but you just got to know how crazy this gets. In the 1500s, somebody claimed to have found the foreskin of the penis of baby Jesus when he was circumcised, and they displayed it, and then it got marched through the streets of Calcutta every year in a massive ceremony until it was stolen in 1983. Nobody knows where it went. People are looking today for the Holy Grail, the first communion cup that Jesus served communion with, and they're in search, and it's all over the web. They're in search of the Ark of the Covenant. Why? Because they believe that if they can just see or be in the presence of, or touch, or be around these magical sort of powerful relics, that it'll change their life. Listen, relics don't change your life. Religion doesn't change your life. Baptism, communion, going to church, tithing, reading a chapter a day, that stuff does not change your life. And if you think it does, you are really missing the point. Because the whole point of the Ark of the Covenant was God's presence and a relationship with God. It's not what God touched that you get to be in the presence of, but rather when God touches your heart. That's what changes your life. That's where the power comes. That's where the blessing comes. That's where the victory comes, when God touches your life. Now, many of you would say, yeah, but listen, that's Old Covenant. That's Old Testament. We know enough about our Bible to realize that we don't live under the Old Covenant anymore. And you know what? You are right. We do not live under the Old Covenant. Jesus brought a brand new covenant. And this might blow your mind, but you got to see this. I love this. Romans 3:25. God set him, Jesus, up to be the sacrifice, the what? The Kepharet. It says in the Bible that God set Jesus up to be the Kepharet, which was what? The covering, the atonement, the mercy seat, that which sealed in our brokenness and covered it over. Jesus is the seat of mercy where sins are atoned through faith. His blood became the demonstration of God's own restorative justice. No longer is there an animal sacrificed and the blood put on the top of this altar. Jesus' blood is now the altar itself. Jesus' blood is the seat of mercy. And all of this confirms his faithful promise to the very end. Jesus is the mercy seat. Jesus is the mercy seat. People are out chasing and digging up ground all over the place looking for this magical box so that they can have the power in their life to transform their life. And they're missing the point. Jesus is the power. Jesus is the mercy seat. It is not about a storage box. It is not about some holy grail or ancient artifact in any way. The power comes in knowing Jesus. And when you know Jesus, and when you are in a personal, close relationship with Jesus, what you'll find is just like the Ark of the Covenant, Jesus will lead you. He will go out in front of you and he will lead you. He will fight your battle. He will fill you with power. He will fill you with more blessing than you can even handle. Power, blessing, victory, courage, vision, peace, all that comes not from a magic box or some religious ceremony. All of that comes from a relationship with him. But I wonder if, even as we wrap up this morning, I wonder if God might be tapping you on the shoulder and saying, you know what? You've been missing the point lately. You've been going after this. I mean, how many times do we go after the healing rather than the healer? How many times do we go after the blessing rather than the one who blesses. We miss the point so continually. And so we want to take a few moments at all of our worship sites right now to ask ourselves the question, have I been missing the point? Have I been getting all excited about the storage box when really I need to be excited about a relationship with God? Have I been excited about the power that might come when I need to be excited about His presence? And we're going to take some time just to worship in communion. And so communion really is another beautiful symbol, but it's just a symbol pointing us back to God, of the sacrifice and the lengths that God would go to have a personal relationship with you. Our servers are going to come right now. They're going to hand out the juice and the bread. I'm going to ask that you just hold on to that. Don't get distracted by the physicality of that, but rather let that point you to the God who loves you so much, and then we're going to worship together.